Hey guys, this is Patrick. We're currently at Jordancon, so we're releasing one of those special patron-only episodes that we've mentioned in other episodes before.
This is something that we recorded a few months ago. It's a pretty good summary of how the One Power works. I think we have now 4 podcasts up for the patrons.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And we're always working on more. Bit of a different approach. It's a little more like looking at a subject material rather than chapter by chapter.
We've also done characters. We started a series on the Forsaken.
We're thinking about doing maybe Sean Chan next, possibly going into the River of Souls, the bonus chapter that Brandon Sanderson released.
Yeah, if you don't know about that, check that out. It's a fun one. It's just Demandred in Shara doing crazy stuff.
And you can find that as a short story in the novel Unfettered.
We found it as an ebook. It was kind of hard to find the paper copy. The title of this episode is The Powers, and it's just a conversation about how the magic systems work in the Wheel of Time and a clarification on all the names and of the different sources of power and how all that works.
And just enjoy this bonus episode while we fly out to Jordancon for the 20th anniversary of Dragonmount and the 10th anniversary of Jordancon and the 1-year anniversary of
this fucking podcast.
This What Spoilers podcast.
Hopefully you're at the con. If not, enjoy this episode, and our next episode will be live at Jordancon.
And if you see us at the con, please come up to us, say hi. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, say what's up.
If we're carrying around microphones, we may just make you sit down and talk with us.
Later, guys.
Bye.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
So when we're approaching this one just a little bit differently, instead of doing a chapter by chapter, we actually want to hit a topic.
Yeah, this is going to be a little bit something different, kind of like the couple of episodes we started What Spoilers with, where we talked about just the Age of Legends, for instance, except this is, I guess you would say, lore-specific topic. So we had a request probably like a couple months ago where someone asked us if we could explain the different types of powers, true power, one power, and I think that confuses people, and just the way different things work. So,
and all the various powers that exist in the world that aren't just from the one power and the true power.
Right. Should I just break into this?
Yeah, I mean, I think just with some background, we can talk about the fact that, we've got most of the magic that we see is the one power throughout the series.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority.
And so there's only a certain number of people that can access that.
Right, and that's a genetic thing. So you have to be born with the ability to access the one power, as opposed to the true power, which is also called the true source. They're the same thing, which comes directly from the Dark One.
And you do need to be able to channel the one power in order to use the true power.
Oh, is that right?
That is true.
I did not know that.
I think Grendel says something about she makes an assumption where she sees Moradin channel the true power and automatically assumes that he can channel the one power.
I feel like I remember that
because he's the only way that you can channel the true power is if you're also a one power channeler.
And when I first started reading Moradin's plotline, I didn't know who he was, so I was like, is this just like some guy who rose amongst dark friends and was given the ability to channel the true power and the true power alone? It took me a while to realize Moradin is Ishmael.
Yeah, I got that one. I think because I was reading them as they came out, that was pretty well speculated by the first book he was in.
Yeah.
Just with the use of the true power was such a giveaway that really the only character we see using the true power on a regular basis is Moradin, Ishmael.
Yeah. For sure. The only person crazy enough to use it over and over.
Right.
Or that exclusively.
But there's two ways that someone who's born as a channeler can become a channeler, right? Because there's those who are born with a spark,
right,
and those that need to be taught.
Uh-huh.
But not everybody can be taught.
What do you mean? As far as availability of teachers? Or, I mean, there's that, but...
Multiple characters, they can train as hard as they want, but they'll never sense the true source. You have to be born with that ability.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't, just pick it up. There is a certain subset of people.
And how exactly that works isn't very well described.
The connection?
Yeah.
To the one power? Yeah, it's definitely something that they can, it's almost like a sixth sense that they can sort of feel this glowing, generally just out of reach. So generally they describe it as something that they're able to reach out and touch when they're in a particular meditative state.
Yeah.
And, the men and the women, use different meditative techniques, but what they're doing essentially is calming their mind to a point where they can sense the true power and reach out and touch it. And I think that if you don't have that sense, you can't become a channeler.
There's nothing to find
exactly
through meditation.
Later when we see the Nynaeve heal channelers, she creates a bridge between two things. And I think that, with a clean, something is severed when a channeler is cut off, and she's bridging the gap between those two things.
Yeah.
And I think in a non-channeler, that bridge either doesn't exist or is so small as to be unusable.
Makes sense. So I did start my notes with the different types of meditation. I don't know if we really want to go into that other than, I guess, to say that Aes Sedai teach novices the rosebud technique, where young lady is taught to envision herself as a rose that's opening to the sun.
That goes in with the nature of the female half of the power, because there are two halves of the power. There's the female half and the male half. And the way you seize them is actually a little bit related to sort of how they behave.
Yeah, that's true.
I once heard someone refer to the various meditative techniques as basically how men and women have sex.
I can see what they mean.
That, like, a bud of a rose opening herself up and then surrendering.
Yeah. I have in my notes here, I'll just read this. A novice is instructed to envision herself as the bud of a rose or another flower, we see that once or twice throughout the series, opening to the sun. Its effects are valued in that the technique allows a channeler to calm herself, to surrender, and then manipulate Saidar, although some female channelers are known to have created their own technique, which is usually something similar. And that's opposed to the flame and the void that we see Rand in particular talk about a lot, but also a few other characters, including some male non-channelers like Lan, who knows about the flame and the void.
And Tam,
right.
Yeah. As well. It's definitely a meditative technique that's used outside of channeling.
Yeah.
But again, I think almost always by males. I don't think the flame and the void is ever used by a woman as a meditative technique.
No, we see Lanfear as Selene refer to, I think she and Rand have a conversation at one point where Rand refers to the void and Selene calls it the oneness.
That's right. Which I wonder if that was a shared meditative technique in the Age of Legends, achieving the oneness.
I would assume so, because, both of these things, the way I'm seeing it anyway, are really about focus and kind of reaching a place of serenity where you can then just sort of operate more efficiently.
Yeah, that makes sense. The women open themselves up to it, and they have this sort of radiance that they allow it to come to them, whereas men have to like seize it and force all, burn away all their emotions. It's a very sort of violent imagery. even as it is a calming imagery. It's instead of like releasing your emotions and letting them go, you're actually burning them away.
Yeah, destroying them.
Destroying them.
Rather than sort of surrendering them and letting them pass through you. Which always reminds me of the "Fear is the Mind Killer" chant from Dune. Some years ago, I would have been able to tell you exactly what it was, but I don't remember.
Fear is the mind killer. Fear is a little death. Yeah, something like that.
It's like I will observe it and let it pass through me in a way or something like that.
Getting in a frame of mind where you can do something remarkable seems to be a fairly common theme, especially through a lot of these various magic books. I think I was calling out like fantasy tropes, that sort of meditative calm right before you like explode with energy.
Yeah.
Definitely one of those fantasy tropes.
It totally is. You see it in a lot of, like all of them.
Yeah.
Animes, which is, I see as a fantasy literature-based stories.
A lot of them are, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we should probably just talk about what the one power is. Now that we've got male channelers and female channelers.
Yeah. I have this quote from Moraine. I'll read that. The one power comes from the true source, the driving force of creation, the force the creator made to turn the wheel of time. Saidin, the male half of the true source, and Saidar, the female half, work against each other and at the same time together to provide that force. Saidin is fouled by the touch of the Dark One, like water with a thin slick of rancid oil floating on top. The water is still pure, but it cannot be touched without touching the foulness. Only Saidar is safe to be used. ... This may be from another quote at the bottom here. The true source cannot be used up, any more than a river can be used up by the wheel of the mill. The source is the river, the Aes Sedai, the water wheel. And that gives us a good idea of sort of how this works, where a channeler, through their focus and meditation, is able to access the force of creation and allow it to flow through them to make something happen. But then I assume it dissipates and goes back, returns.
I think of it more as the power is flowing and the channeler is the water wheel.
Yeah.
And so by channeling, they're sort of allowing themselves to be dipped in the power, and that creates an energy that they can move and channel and create things with.
So the channeling is the millstone being turned.
Exactly. It's the wheel being turned. It's not, you're not actually scooping up the water and doing stuff with the water. Which, when we go back to the Eye of the World, in a lot of ways, I think perhaps the pool of Saidin, the essence of Saidin, is a little bit of that true source isolated from the turning of the wheel and the powers of creation. That's like, and by allowing it to flow back into the main source of the one power, the channel of the one power, Rand was able to sort of tap into that. But I don't think he was using it up. I think he was a conduit through which it passed.
Right.
That's why she says it can no more be used up
than the river that turns the wheel.
I like that analogy a lot.
Yeah.
But I sort of think of it as a circular river. Instead of a single river going downhill, you have two opposing forces that cause the river to go in a continuous circle forever. And then the wheels in the middle of that being powered by those forces of creation.
I'm nodding.
Through the wheel passes the weaves of people's lives.
Yeah, and this stuff is hard to visualize, but it's fun to try.
Yeah. Because it's very metaphysical. And in some ways, the conservation of energy applies because a certain amount of power allows you to do a certain amount of work.
Yeah.
But in other ways, a certain amount of power, sure, but you have an infinite source of power, which lets you do all sorts of really cool things.
That plays right in. I only wrote a little bit about the wheel, but I have that next to my notes. And I just sort of flung this together from a couple of different sources, but I kind of want to read this too. Time, in the Robert Jordan Wheel of Time universe, time is a wheel with 7 spokes. Each spoke is an age. It is a loom which weaves the great pattern. The lives of living things and reality around them are the threads which create the lace of ages, or reality in general. The lace encompasses all worlds and all realities. So that includes the mirror worlds that we see, various different places that we see throughout the series.
All the portal stone worlds, all the various worlds that we see when we go through Terangrial, the Aelfin and the Eelfin worlds.
Are all a part of the Lace of Ages.
You know, one thing I don't want to confuse the wheel that is time in the Wheel of Time versus the wheel I was talking about before, the mill wheel. Because the mill wheel is more like an analogy for a channeler using the power versus the Wheel of Time, which is more like the central wheel of everything being turned by these external forces.
The mechanics of the universe as opposed to the mechanics of channeling, which do sound really similar. And everything in this universe has kind of a cyclical nature.
Absolutely.
That's all about circles and turning and...
Well, and it makes sense that by channeling, you're tapping into the power of creation. So you're tapping into the power that turns the Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
And the way that works is consistent. You know, I was reading through your notes, and I noticed that here, Moraine says the true source cannot be used up.
Yeah.
She doesn't say the one source.
Oh, I think the true source is up. Huh.
Because I always thought the true source and the true power were the same thing, and the one power. Do you think that's an Eye of the Worldism?
That's funny. I wonder if I miswrote it or mistyped it, or...
We'll read directly from the book, page 171, across the Terran. The one power, Moraine was saying, comes from the true source, which is why I think it's very hard to keep the true power separate.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that they call it the true the one power comes from the true source, but the true power comes from
the Dark One.
Yeah.
So the true source is the creator, but the Dark One is powering the true power.
Thinking a lot lately about the unknown things in questions that I hear fans asking Brandon Sanderson and stuff. And Brandon Sanderson at some point said something like, there's some questions that no one has asked yet.
Right.
And I believe it was in reference to like Rand and Ishmael, the connection, the Dark One, and all the things that are happening at the end of the book. I think I was reading about the all caps speaker.
Right.
At the end of the Eye of the World and at the end of A Memory of Light.
The person who is most likely the creator, but may or may not be the Dark One.
Right. I don't know. I'm filing it away. I have nothing else to say about that, but...
I had someone ask me if we had any ideas what hadn't been asked, and I was like, no, but I do hope to figure it out during the podcast.
I do hope to eventually ask those questions. Yeah.
But at this point, no, I have no idea what he's talking about. Because it's like we've all asked about Nakomi and the pipe lighting and all the obvious stuff people have asked about. And this is something he said nobody's asked about. So that's why I hesitate to even speculate as to what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I think it could be just like some other minor detail that honestly like no one really even noticed. And it could have major implications.
One power, true source makes me wonder if the things are related. But I mean, there's obvious negative effects when a person uses the true power.
Right. So, I mean, here's just an outlandish theory.
Mm-hmm.
The creator is the Dark One. He's the source of both. Just like there's a male half and a female half, there's a one power and a true power half.
Yeah, I'm thinking along those lines too.
But the idea that we have artificially separated the creator and the Dark One, and that in some ways they may be the same thing. The Dark One created his own prison.
And the war that ended the Age of Legends is called the War of Power, which I always thought was a vague, odd term.
Well, that could be just the true power versus the one power.
Yeah. We'll have to do some more thinking on that one because it's interesting, and I want to ask the right question at some point.
Definitely.
To Brandon Sanderson. What I really want is just RJ's notes.
Oh, I don't have a couple of years to go through those, but that would be fun.
I kind of want to read this quote that I had next. This is from Watt Wikia, but I liked whoever wrote this did a really good job. And this is explaining the wheel and the lace of ages, essentially. Think of a great cosmic loom in the shape of a 7-spoked wheel. Each spoke is representative of an age, one passing, one always receding, one approaching. Put in place by the Creator, it uses the lives of people as threads to weave the great pattern. The wheel gains its energy, or is turned by, from the true source. Sidin and Sidar working against and with each other. No one knows how long a full turning of the wheel actually takes, and it very well not be the same amount of time in each turning. Reincarnation is a fact, as well as prophecies, for example, when the Dark One reincarnates a number of the Forsaken.
And then there's natural reincarnation that occurs as well,
right?
Which is a little bit different. I mean, I wouldn't even say that the Dark One reincarnates the Forsaken. I would say he puts their souls in a new body. And like their mind as well. Whereas reincarnations, you tend not to have the same mind, even though you have the same soul.
Yeah. So it's more like skipping a step.
Yeah.
Rather than waiting to be reincarnated, someone's soul is removed from their body and you're put into their body.
That would be my assumption. Yeah. And you, mind and soul are transferred over, not just soul.
Yeah.
Which is interesting that that's a bit of what happens to Rand as he channels and is corrupted by the power. You know, his soul has been reincarnated, but not his mind. But as he gains the corruption of the taint, his mind almost comes, he's able to access information from his past lives.
Lose Theron's mind.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is typically, like you just said, only a power that can be bestowed by the Dark One.
Right. And in a way, it was.
Right.
Because the Dark One created the taint, which allowed him to access those memories. He even says that in the last book, that, he does that, think about it. If the taint hadn't happened, I wouldn't have the memories I need to win this battle.
Yeah.
Well, and we know that the power has a pretty significant effect on the people who wield it. And start with the slowing.
Yeah, there's increased longevity.
And so the stronger you are, the longer you live, is what it boils down to. With an upper limit of around 900 years.
Yeah. And that is, I feel like I should throw out there, without the interference of the Oath Rod.
Right.
So most of the Aes Sedai that we meet, almost all of them, are no older than, I think, 350 to 400 years. Do we know, how old Cadsuane was?
I feel like Cadsuane is in her early 300s.
Okay.
Maybe late, but she's the oldest one. Maybe late 300s. Does anyone on the channel know? She was born in 705, so yeah, she's just over 300. Which I think 300 is just over 300 is the maximum age we see any Aes Sedai get to.
Yeah, Cadsuane being the oldest. However, don't we see a member of the kin that's a little older?
Well, but she never touches an Oath Rod.
Right.
So we see members of the kin that are much, much older, as well as
Windfinders.
Windfinders, thank you. Well, and one thing I found interesting is that the Windfinder's rank is tied to the Wave Mistress that they're with.
Yeah, we've talked about that a little before.
Yeah.
I feel like I guess I hadn't put much thought into it before, but that is interesting that a Windfinder has to climb the ladder over and over. The ladder of command, that is.
Right. Because she gets basically linked up with someone who lives a normal lifespan, and when that person dies, the Windfinder has to restart from the beginning.
So she could only be a high-ranked Windfinder for, say, 60 years.
Right. Something like that.
And then she has to go back to scrubbing decks.
Which is why you end up with some really weird, someone with a bunch of holes in their ears, and the piercings never go away.
Yeah. Well, the scars don't.
No. And then, of course, you have the channelers in Shara that are tattooed, and they probably live for a very long time as well.
Yeah.
We see wise ones live for a very long time. The idea that the oath rod, I think they say it cuts the lifespan in half of all channelers. So if you were going to live 400 years, you live 200. If you were going to live 800 years, you live about 400.
Yeah.
And since 800 seems to be about the cap, 400 really seems to be, and that's only for our most powerful channelers. Someone like Cod Swain, who's powerful, but not quite that powerful, really realistically have their lifespan capped at around 600 years. Cut that in half, and she should pretty much be dead. She's at the end of her lifespan with the Oath Rod. But I wonder if some of her Tirangrial and the fact that she has Angrial has helped her stay alive longer.
She's devious.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be terribly surprised if she found a way to be released from the Oath Rod.
Possibly.
That's, again, more pure speculation.
Right.
But
they're definitely talking about retirement into the kin at the end of the series. And I could see her retiring into the kin.
Right. We also know that Katsuena's retired 4 different times or something like that.
Well, and now she's the Armelin seat. So there's going to be, at the end of the series, they give her the Armelin seat. So she has to somehow transfer that power to somebody else before she can step down.
Yeah. Write the next book.
Yeah. Well, and that's a dynamic I'd love to see. Cod Swain and Logain as the heads of the Black and the White Tower. And how they negotiate.
Interesting.
One in Andor, one in Tarvalin.
Yeah, not too terribly far from each other.
No, not at all.
And while we're on Aes Sedai and Sidar channelers, next thing I have is the differences between the two powers, or the separation of the one power, so Sidar and Sidene. I'll read the first part of this. So Sidar is the female half of the one power. Unlike what's described to be the more violent Sidene, Sidar is said to be a river of power, which must be surrendered to or embraced in order to then manipulate it. Sidar is described as a gentle force, which can only be controlled after surrendering to it. Oh, that's a little redundant. But infinitely powerful. A force which will do what you wish it to, but requires patience and submission in order to properly channel it. Women universally speak of it as embracing, rather than Sidar channelers who almost universally describe it as seizing or controlling Sidar.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
seeing what I can make of this.
It's this very different sort of form of power where, with Sidar, I imagine you have this giant, again, water seems to be the right analogy here, but this giant river that runs deep and extremely fast, but is just totally calm on the surface. And if you step into that and try and hold your ground, it's going to knock you off your feet and just take you under.
Yeah.
But if, on the other hand, you just sort of dig a channel in the direction you want the power to go, it will follow that channel very easily, and you're able to do all you want with it. Whereas the male half, I think of more as like being in the rapids. And you've got to have that paddle, and you've got to be constantly paddling, and if you don't pay attention, you're going to hit a rock, and you're just constantly trying to...
That's a good analogy.
Push the water, and if you want to, do something with it, you just, pick it up and throw it at whatever you want to, you have to be constantly fighting it because you're in the rapids. And those are, just like a river, the various parts of this, I think, again, a circular river that's turning the wheel, they have rapids and they have smooth
parts. I think Rand frequently describes it as a raging torrent.
Right.
I have here, Sidene is described as a raging torrent that resists any attempts to control it. To employ it requires strict control, forcing it to do what you want. Male channelers universally refer to gaining the power as seizing it, and weaving Sidene as wielding it like a weapon.
And then, of course, it has this nice little add-on from the backlash of sealing the Dark One into his prison.
Right, which is a taint that Moraine describes it as an oil slick. And I feel like that's the best analogy I've heard for it. where floating on top of the raging torrent is layer of oil, just like if you put oil in a cooking pot.
Yeah.
So in order to reach the water, you have to dip the spoon through the oil first.
Right. And they don't mix. What do you think the taint is? Do you think it's of the true power? Do you think it's of the dark one? It reminds me a lot of Mashin Shin, just in terms of like when we see Nynaeve pulling it off the mind of the male channelers. It's this black, oily substance.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but it appears that whatever the taint is on Sidene is the same effect that channelers of the true power end up having, where they eventually go insane.
Yeah,
or become paranoid and go insane. There does seem to be a connection, and I mean they're both coming from the Dark One,
right? You know, I think there are consequences to using the true power beyond using the one power. We see the flame in the eyes and the mouth. You know, the advanced saw.
They're not exactly the same.
No, I was wondering do you really think that the insanity of Moradin is due entirely to channeling?
I don't, and I'm getting an idea here. I'll read this first. The taint on Sidene has deleterious effects on male channelers' mental and physical health. The more of the power, the more of Sidene a male channels, the faster his condition deteriorates. That no longer happens after it's cleansed, but I don't know if I have this written down here, but the channeling sickness that happens from channeling Sidar while it still has the taint on it doesn't just make men go insane, although we see a lot more of that because those are the beginning effects, where they hallucinate and become paranoid, but the advanced channeling, shouldn't call it channeling sickness because that's a different thing, but the advanced consequences of reaching through the Dark One's taint on Sidene is your body literally rots while you're alive.
That's right. It's
so
almost like
your
leprosy.
body starts to fall exactly like that.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen to true power channelers.
No, and in some ways the insanity is almost, I think Nynaeve describes it as a form of compulsion when she heals it. It sort of resembles compulsion, that it compels you to be insane in a lot of ways. Enigma
is saying, I always thought it was like a form of compulsion.
Yeah.
Also, I kind of want to throw out there, Christine Benini saying, Alosia is the oldest known kin at 600.
Sure. And you don't get up to that 800, 700, 800 years old until you get way more powerful.
Right.
So you need to not only be old, but also like super powerful.
We've definitely talked about that in previous episodes, where it does have to do with how frequently you use the power and how much power you can use at once.
Right.
Affects the slowing.
But I think only like LTT and like Lanfear and you have to be at that level of power to get up to the 800 years of age. Yeah, the different groups rank their members by different, Aes Sedai, it's all about power. But the kin, it's all about age. Which the idea of retiring into the kin is kind of interesting, because then you're automatically the low person on the totem pole, no matter how high up you are in an Aes Sedai.
Like a Windfinder.
Yeah, exactly. We see Rand in his visions start to rot, but the series doesn't really happen over a long enough period of time.
Yeah, that's a possible future.
To see that actually happen to any channelers. But we've definitely heard it described multiple times, and we've seen it in visions.
I also kind of want to throw out there, I think the male channeler is known to have been channeling the longest is Logain, if I'm right. And by that I mean not Forsaken. Reaching through the taint.
Taim was up there.
Taim as well.
He was around longer.
Okay.
But he, that might be why he ended up converting to the Dark One, because if he hadn't, he would have very quickly gone insane.
Yeah.
He may have been on the verge of that. And Logain, he may have been channeling for a while, but he was also stilled for a long time. So he couldn't touch the source.
That's true.
And he does talk about his own kind of insanity.
We don't see any characters with the exception of potential realities, have the true channeling sickness where they rot alive. But I believe we see Loyal talk about accounts of it.
Yeah. That would make sense. Yeah, I think Logan, it's not that he was cleansed of the taint while he was stilled. It's just that he wasn't accumulating any more during that period of time.
Yeah.
So he wasn't going any more insane while he was stilled. So that gave him just a little bit of a break.
Yeah, this is interesting. Now I'm just sort of pondering the taint, the true power, the Dark One's touch, and what all that means. It is like a form of compulsion. And someone in Discord, Aradia, is saying that when Nynaeve heals the taint sickness, that she describes it as like healing a compulsion. Like it takes the same sort of structure in their mind.
It's got like hooks into the mind.
Yeah.
And like that's what allows it to alter the way you think. And I think maybe it's more not so much that it is compulsion as it takes the same form because it's altering your mind. Because it's not compelling you to do anything in particular, it's just making you insane.
And yeah, and we see that manifest in different ways where I won't be able to remember all the names, but there's an Ashaman that describes seeing Mirrodral in the shadows or like creeping around corners. There's one that sees spiders, all sorts of different effects.
Yeah, I mean the one who gets the mind of a child.
Oh, right.
You know. And it's frequent. There's a lot of them in the Black Tower. It's a number of them go nuts.
I so badly want to come to some awesome conclusion right now, but I really don't know what to say more than that.
Yeah, I don't think there is, other than to say that the Dark One, placed the taint, which is part of himself, on Saidin as a backlash to being sealed, and because while he was being sealed, he was actually touching Saidin, he was able to put something on it. Whereas he couldn't touch Saidar. And, obviously when he gets sealed at the very end, he's only able to touch himself. And so the Dark One gets sealed up in his room touching himself. He's basically a teenager. But that's why he's not able to taint any of the other two powers during the last battle, is because he's not touching the other two powers. Versus the true power, which is more of like, I almost feel like that's taking a part of the Dark One into yourself and like accepting his corruption of your soul.
Right.
And he's like burns you out from the inside out. Because, eyes are the windows to the soul. And what's wrong with Ishmael? His eyes are on fire.
Yeah.
His soul's on fire. I think by using the true power, you are literally burning your soul.
I'm nodding. We see the Dark One, for instance, in all the Forsaken later describe, or I think Rand even sees the Dark One puts like a filter, or gives them a filter if you swear to him, so that you can channel Saidin without going mad.
Mm-hmm. Which basically means the Dark One is your source of Saidin.
Oh, I'm imagining that Saidin comes from the same place it always has, but the Dark One is kind of removing the taint before you channel it.
Sure. So whereas I was thinking what it was is that you would the Dark One was the filter, and so you'd tap in through that black cord to the Dark One, and he would pump Saidin through himself, cleaning it off, and then through the black cord to you.
I see. I always kind of imagine the black cord as the sieve itself, but I guess... Yeah.
I imagine that as the connection to the Dark. Yeah, it's sort of a distinction without a difference, because that black cord is the connection to the Dark One, and I guess I'm not sure whether they get the power through the cord or whether they pull in the power normally, and then the cord acts as a sieve and prevents them from, and basically absorbs the taint off of them and pumps it back to the Dark One.
Right.
But the way I picture it, when because Ishmael, when we see him with the black cord, he gets really big, and we see it enveloping him.
Where, like I was saying, I always imagine like a sieve, so like you can pull Saidin through this thing that the Dark One gives you.
Got it.
That's the way I visualized it, but like we just said, I'm not sure if that's actually correct.
Well, and Enigma, I think you said without the taint, Rand wouldn't be able to seal him in correctly. I mean, the taint gives him the knowledge that he needs, but he doesn't use the taint to seal him in. He just uses the true power.
Right, it gives him the memories of Lews Therin.
Yeah, and he uses the untainted one power with the true power.
Isn't there a point where the taint in Rand's mind it's never fully healed, right?
No, it's not healed. Nynaeve can't heal it. It's too complex.
That's what I'm thinking. Or we see a scene where she describes it.
But what happens is he coats it with the glowing power.
Right. So they're like these. I always imagine them as kind of intertwining vines.
So he still has the taint in his mind, and he still...
Which is why he can not rot alive while simultaneously retaining the memories of his previous life.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So yeah, I mean, the taint is absolutely necessary for him to have the knowledge of Lews Therin Telamon. And by removing the taint, I'm guessing he would lose those memories? That's actually a good question. If Nynaeve had been able to heal Rand, would he have lost all access to the old memories?
I would think so.
Yeah.
This is making me wonder about the Dark One has these powers over death, essentially. And because Rand comes into contact with the taint, he gains the memories of his previous life. Why would those still exist? Again, more open speculation, but why does the Dark One hold those? Is that part of...
To me, that seems to be more a part of the...
Where were they?
I think they're in his head. Because, like we see in a lot of cases, characters with like strong Manetheren blood can, like example Matt, can come up with phrases from past lives.
Right.
That the connection is there in everybody to their past life. It's those memories are still a part of your soul. It's just you really can't access them for good reason, because you'd go insane. It's just, it's not good. Brigitte doesn't have access to her memories normally when she reincarnates, for good reason. But the memories are still all there, and when she goes back into Tel'aran'rhiod, she remembers all of her lives.
Right. It's an incarnation rule. You're not allowed to have those memories.
Right. It's sort of part of reincarnation, but they are still embodied in your soul. Yeah, I mean, there is a good question as to whether or not he would have been able to use that sort of gold veins to uncover his past life anyway without the taint. But I don't...
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think the taint is integral into him accessing those memories.
I mean, maybe he could have, but it would have been too late at that point.
Right.
He needed Lews Therin's memories.
Oh, from the very beginning. I mean, even from the Sword of Fire that he creates at the end of the Eye of the World. I was speculating is one of the early memories.
LGT's tricks.
Yeah.
Give me my fingers, or whatever it is.
Yeah. My hands. Why can't I use my hands?
Male and female differences.
Well, one big difference is, of course, circles.
Right.
Women are able to bond together and form a mutual bond in order to amplify their power.
With one channeler has to be in charge of the power that's in the circle. So the collective power of each channeler is in the circle, and one person is in charge of directing that power. And it goes to a limit of 13 women together can do this. And then we were just talking about this the other day, but if you add as a 14th a male, there's a descending number.
Let me read from the wiki.
Go for it, yeah.
With the addition of a man, bringing the total to 14, an additional 13 female channelers are possible, reaching 27. So with one man, you can bond 27 channelers together.
Okay.
So one man, 26 females. After this, only 8 female channelers can be added with the additional one male channeler, up to the limit of 72 total. So you get 13 plus 1, plus 13 is your 27. And then
8 plus 1.
8 plus 1.
Plus 8 plus 1.
Up to the limit of 72. How many male channelers are in that? 6 males is the max?
I think that sounds right, because...
So the top configuration is 13 plus 1 plus 13 plus 1 plus 8 plus 1 plus 8 plus 1 plus 8 plus 1 plus 8 plus 1 to 72. And that's 6 male channelers with 60... Thank you, Enigma, for doing the math for me. 66 females.
So it's a true full circle.
And then you can have, there's a couple other like weird situations where you only have, I think you can have 1 woman and 2 men. It's the only time where you have more males than females. And also you can obviously have 1 male and 1 female.
Yeah, I think that's possible. And men can't do this alone, and I believe only female channeler can initiate a circle. I have a little bit on the differences of how men and women channel. We've gone into this a lot in our chapter episodes, but I feel like I should touch on it again. I'll read this little paragraph here. Male channelers as a whole usually are much stronger in the amount of power that they can hold than female channelers of comparable level, in much the same way men generally are stronger in their muscles than women, which is often the analogy that's used in the books. But female channelers can compensate this lack of brute force with far more dexterity. And I believe all this information comes from Lanfear at some point. We certainly see her channel in this way.
I think some of it comes from Moraine as well.
Yeah.
The difference between male and female strength.
Mm-hmm. So in all the things that only rough power is not needed, the strongest female channelers can accomplish with the 1 power exactly the same as the strongest male. And we definitely see that when we see Lanfear fighting, where she seems to be able to outmaneuver male opponents.
Well, don't forget she has an incredibly strong ter'angreal on her as well.
That's true.
That's one of her huge advantages.
I'm thinking of a scene where we see her cutting threads of Sidene. Is it her and Rand? Or does Rand try to overpower her at some point?
He does a couple of times, and she just... Because she knows where his... early on, she overcomes him just by knowing where he's channeling, and she's able to slice right through it.
Right.
And then she basically kicks his ass when in front of the red ter'angreal when Moraine takes her out. Because she has that ridiculously powerful...
That's what I'm thinking of.
Angreal that Moraine gives her.
Or that Moraine takes from her, eventually.
Eventually, but she gives it to her first.
That's right. I think we've talked about this a little bit before. It was because she saw it in a vision that she had to have it for one reason or another.
Exactly. And so she laid it out carefully in front of the stone ter'angreal where she knew Lanfear would show up, and she knew Lanfear would pick it up and start using it.
Yeah. The
acrobat bent over backwards.
Holding its own feet or something like that. Or tied to its own... with its wrist bound to its ankles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what
powerful.
That means.
It's super powerful.
Yeah. We just went through linking and circles.
The best and the most powerful acts of channeling happen to be with a combination of male and female power. The two combined are able to do things you simply can't do with one alone.
Yeah.
We see that with the Bowl of the Winds, obviously with Cleansing of the Source. The male-female mutual bond between channelers lets them basically read each other's mind.
Uh-huh.
We see that with Andral and Pavera.
We also see that said about the greatest works, which I think you were referencing, but things like Whitebridge.
Right. The Eye of the World.
Yeah, had to be done with men and women working together.
The Choden Call were created by men and women working together.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to talk about the 5 different powers?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how to describe this. I guess Saidar and Sidene are made of 5 different elements, but in the books they're not really called elements.
No, but yeah, that makes sense. They call them 5 different powers.
And those are earth, spirit, water, air, and fire. Right, also known as the 5 powers. And in combining these, a channeler makes a weave that can do various things depending on the elements used and how they're all woven together. I also have here that it's thought that men are stronger with fire and earth while women are generally stronger with air and water. We've debated about this a little bit before, and there are definitely exceptions that we see.
Right. I was going to say, we've seen a bunch of exceptions.
Right. Where Egwene is particularly powerful with earth. She has that affinity, which is classified by some as a talent in Affinity.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like an increased ability to channel one particular.
That's also why she's better at making Quendiar than almost anybody else, is because she has that
Earth-related.
Yep, it's an Earth-related talent.
And she finds out about when the Shanshan test their channelers for various talents.
Right.
And it's discovered that she can look for metal underneath the ground.
One of the ways that she's able to become so powerful is that she picks up a lot of tricks and tips from all these different cultures that she is exposed to.
Right.
You know, she's trained as a
domain.
Yeah. She's trained as a Aes Sedai. She's trained as a Wise One. She's trained as a Sea Finder. Or not necessarily trained as, but picks up stuff from everybody. And so she's able to sort of get a broader exposure to the various powers than almost any other character.
Yeah, she goes through the 4 schools.
Exactly. and she picks up a lot of skills from the Forsaken through Moghedian.
Yeah, that's right. And I always saw her time with the Shanshan as, like we were talking about, when Rand channels the Eye of the World, where it kind of pulls open it makes him grow faster in the power and his ability to use more of it at once.
Later, Suan apologizes to the girls for forcing them. She basically says, I'm sorry, I knew you would be forced to get more powerful more quickly by being out in the world like that, and I'm sorry that I did that to you.
Oh.
Because it has its risks, being forced.
Oh, sure. But I was going to say, I saw her time with the Shanshan as doing that as well. Where she's,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that really, her power is expanded greatly. And I think she says that she got way more powerful after her time with the Shanshan.
They teach her to tear Earth apart and make the waves of Earth, or turn Earth to water, the gong.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of power, and, you know, it sort of forces her to get more powerful more quickly than she otherwise would have. It doesn't get her more powerful than she would have gotten there eventually, but this way it happens more quickly.
Right.
And it's dangerous because it does kill, if you do that, a certain percentage, a fairly high percentage, die. And that's what's happening in the Black Tower the entire time that Taim is ruling it, is he is forcing every single one of those boys to go too fast. And he's forcing them all.
Yeah.
And so a certain percentage die from the madness, but a certain percentage die from channeling accidents.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was a risk that the girls took when they were captured.
Our Watchrions were talking about that a bit earlier. Each Ashaman in training, or each Black Tower initiate, is given a glass of wine each night. And if it's thought that you're going mad, there's poison in your wine. So
Right.
You just go to sleep and never wake up.
I think for the most part they wait till somebody actually has gone mad.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them are a little mad. It's like when they
a
actually
little bit's
break.
okay.
Yeah. A little mad is okay.
Another thing I have here that's a bit interesting, and the differences between male and female channelers, is the different ways that they sense other channelers. So I'll read this here. Female channelers can tell when other women are touching the source. A white glowing aura appears around their body, though only visible to those trained to touch the one power, and Saidar specifically, I should point out. So people who can channel Saidar can see when another person is channeling Saidar.
Right. They get that glowing aura.
And also feel it. It is also relatively easy for them to gauge each other's strength in the power. Men, on the other hand, can only sense intuitively when another man is channeling. So they don't see the same aura as much as feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of less, I don't want to say tangible, because neither is really tangible, but I think you can maybe see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I would imagine it feels more like waves of heat or pulses of sound rather than like a glowing visual aura.
Yeah, I think it's Logain at some point describes it as a general sense of menace, as if like the kind of feeling where if someone lifted a club over you, you feel that.
Like eyes on the back of your head.
Way.
If someone's looking at you, and
right.
like, you feel someone staring at you, and it's
so
sort of like
the more
that.
likely you think they're going to hit you, the more you feel this emotional content. Whereas women can just look at it; it's evident.
Very visual. And then, of course, there's the ability of Sidar channelers to sense Sidene channelers and vice versa.
Yeah, I have here, male channelers can sense a woman holding Sidar as goosebumps on their skin, while women have a less of an innate sense to tell when men are channeling.
As far as we can tell, don't they have no innate sense?
I think it's none, other than the few channelers we see with a special terangrial. Mm-hmm. And there is a weave that I forget, maybe it's Mogedian that describes later that it can be done.
Yeah, although the version that she's teaching the girls is not designed to work. It's designed to just give them a terrible headache and fail miserably. So
yeah,
there is a way to do it, but that's not what she's teaching the girls.
They do discover that themselves eventually, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure we ever see anyone use that weave.
Spider-like thing to do.
But I don't ever see her. I'm not sure I ever see a female use that weave to detect male channelers.
Successfully. No, I don't think so.
Not even any of the Forsaken.
Only Cad, Swain, and eventually Nynaeve, who have a Paralis net.
And then there's one power that nobody can sense.
The true power. And my notes move right into that. I'll read the opening description. The true power is a lot like the one power, but its source is the dark one rather than the force of creation. It is also not divided into parts, and any male or female person the DO chooses can use the true power. Although, is that true?
I think it's any male or female channeler
that
not
the DO
necessarily
chooses?
Male or female person.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this question out there. Do we ever see anyone channel the true power that can't also channel the one power?
No. I'll answer that question. No.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Definitely not.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right. I can't think of any case anyway.
Now, I guess the question is, does the Dark One have the ability to grant the true power to somebody? I don't think so, and the reason I don't is because of Slayer. Because the whole reason that Lord Luke, turned to the Dark One is he wanted to channel. And if the Dark One could have granted him the true power, he probably would have done that. But instead, he bonded him with another soul in Isam.
That's right.
Isam.
Right, but Slayer's basically is given this strong power over the world of dreams, which is a very powerful power, but it's not like channeling.
No.
It's a strong talent.
Right. But, like we see Perrin use it.
To travel.
I mean, it lets you do some incredible things that you can't do with the power. So in some ways, it's more powerful.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have to create a gateway. He can just pop in and out.
You can also pull someone into the world. So you can enter Teleran Riyadh, pull someone into it, and kill them.
Right.
With leaving nothing but their dead body in the real world.
Not even their dead body. You could probably pull their real body.
You could.
Yeah. Can Perrin pull someone's real body in? I think so.
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
He could enter Teleran Riyadh and create a gateway. Enter Teleran Riyadh where he could do basically whatever he wants. Create a gateway and pull someone through it.
Right. Yeah, he rescues Fail like that, as Radia was saying. There's an interesting conversation about whether Galid can channel, or can be trained to channel.
Yeah, what?
I don't.
Why's that?
Just going on in the Discord. Just there's a few hints throughout that he might be able to channel. I don't think he can, but he's never tested.
Yeah, I mean, why not? We would have to assume that for everyone, for all the male channelers that are discovered, there would be some that would have to be taught.
Right.
So, varying degrees of power and
his family certainly, he's related to
filled
Rand.
with channelers, yeah.
He's Rand's half brother, so his half sister is one of the more powerful female channelers. His mother is a channeler. His niece and nephew, when Elaine eventually has kids, will be channelers.
I'm nodding.
Yeah. So, he very well could be a prime candidate for a channeler. But just like with all the other, if you never learn, doesn't much matter.
Yeah.
And if he was obviously born without the spark, so, he would never become a wilder or anything like that without intense training.
Next thing that I had was the only person who seems to be able to channel the true power without the direct aid of the Dark One is Rand through his strange link with Ishmael.
I'm not even sure that Rand is necessarily channeling the true power so much as Ishmael's doing it, and Rand is sort of forcing him to do it.
Drawing true power through him?
Yeah. I sort of think of Rand as using Moradin as like Angreal.
I like that.
Like a true power Angreal.
Do we see Ishmael ever manipulate Rand in a similar way? Through the link?
Yeah. Doesn't he stab his own hand to make Rand drop something?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how he gets the Kalendor from him. Mm-hmm. Is Moradin stabs his own hand, and that causes a pain in Rand, and he drops the sword.
Each channeler's strength in the true power is dictated by the Dark One. So Moradin and or Ishmael would be at the high end of that. As Nablus, he's given, I believe, the ability to channel as much true power as he wants at any time. Isn't there a scene where Ishmael asks the Dark One for more access?
I don't remember that scene.
Just reading the Discord stuff. People are throwing us a lot of good stuff right now. I want to go back and read some of this Galad stuff. It's a fun theory, and I like it, and it seems likely. It fits really well.
Yeah, let's keep that in mind as we get exposure to him, of like maybe he is a potential channeler.
Yeah.
And, you know, the true power is not a power of creation. It is a power of destruction, and that reflects in how it's used. For example, with the one power, when you create a gateway, you're essentially making two places the same and then traveling between them.
Right.
With the true power, you're actually tearing a hole in creation and stepping through it. And that just seems, you know, even though the effect may be the same, over and over and over again, what we see is it achieves that effect through the destroying something. And that's where its sort of unknown effect can really come from.
And I kind of want to throw this out there to see what you think. When someone channels the true power, we see a kind of warping around them in some cases. Can everyone see that? Does that mean that there's an indication that someone's channeling the true power because there's I imagine it's like heat rising off asphalt where it makes a warp in the air?
I think everyone can see that. I think that's like you said, it's just a physical effect of actually distorting the
I think it's a physical warping of the pattern.
Exactly.
The true power is also said to be highly addictive, more so than the one power. Although, like we were saying earlier, we don't get to see that many instances of people channeling so much of it other than Ishmael.
He is the main. We see Grendel, a few of the other Forsaken use it. And possibly Shadar Haran? Or no, he just uses the Murdral trick of disappearing into shadows.
I think so.
Yeah.
And Murdral.
Working on that one.
Yeah. To have a separate set of powers. I have that right after this.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about the true power?
I
guess the saw. We haven't brought up the saw.
Yeah. Following habitual use, spots of blackness appear in the eyes of a user of the true power called Sa. These move more quickly across the eye depending on how much of the true power the user is drawing. The more power used, and the more frequently it's used, dictates the amount and speed of the Sa. It's believed by many in the fan community, including myself, that the final stage of Sa accumulation results in the fire in Ishmael's mouth and eyes that we see in The Eye of the World. The book, The Eye of the World.
Yeah. Well, really all first three books.
Yeah. The only user known to have who is the only user known to have taken it that far. I think we see references and people saying that the users are said to eventually go insane like users of Tainted Sidene, but I don't have any real evidence for that other than Ishmael acting insanely, but that could be for other reasons.
He could be insane for a host of reasons, not the least of which, and I'm sure one contributing factor is the channeling of the true power.
I'm sure it helps.
Yeah. I just had a thought that, I was saying earlier that eyes are the windows to the soul, and that, you really are, by channeling a bunch of it, burning out your soul. And so, those little black dots I see as sort of like the corruption of the true power slowly eating away at your soul and like basically creating these little sort of black spots on your soul that's visible through your eyes.
Like a taint on the soul.
Yeah, but I had an interesting thought that at the end, when Rand gets... Doesn't his eye become a yin-yang, the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai? Yeah, so he gets that one saw frozen in his eye. And so I have to wonder, he's able to bring all the powers together, and I kind of wonder if maybe seeing the symbol of Tar-Valon, of the ancient Aes Sedai, in his eye is sort of a combination of the true power and the one power into the forces of creation. And so that has something to do with the pipe lighting.
Yeah.
But, rampant speculation there.
No, I like it. And that makes me want to speculate about what the actual meaning of the Aes Sedai symbol is.
So where does it first come? What is
like,
it?
does the black part actually represent Saidin?
Or does it represent the true power
and all the powers of creation? Therefore all the powers of creation.
Right.
Combined together. And I mean, that is a compelling, the saw in the shape of the dude, that's a thing. That's not an accident.
Because the saw comes from the true power, and the saw becomes the black part, the dragon fang in his eye.
Yeah. It's also called the dragon's fang.
Right.
Talk amongst yourselves. There's more to this. This is something.
And it doesn't just work on one level. It works on, there's level on level on level.
It would make sense that the dragon fang might represent the true power.
Oh, yeah, Timber's just here asleep at my feet. I gave him a bone and did a long walk before we went, so he's all pooped out.
I didn't even realize he was down there. I just accidentally put my foot on him. The pipe lighting, is that, like, I want to call it the power, where the one power and the true power together make the power? The true power of creation?
Yeah, I mean, yes, maybe. That explains it as much as anything.
Brandon.
But, he doesn't have access to either of the powers. He seems to have access to something
else
above and beyond.
Well, I'm imagining, if it's all together, maybe. What if people in the current age, up until Rand at the end, are channeling just a portion of they are just channeling a portion of the possible powers.
Right. But it seems like, to me, I don't think that his abilities at the end are a result of
doesn't have anything to do with the true power?
Yeah, it has more to do with, like, the world of dreams and the fact that he is able to manipulate the real world. He can see the Matrix, right? He's able to manipulate the real world in a very similar way that he was able to manipulate the worlds of dreams. That seems to be more related to the fact that he actually wove the threads of creation during the fight with the Dark One than anything else.
Yeah. Okay.
That he's not necessarily weaving Saidin or Sidar, but he's weaving the actual threads.
And Saidin and Sidar are described as the power of creation, and the true power is described as the power of destruction.
The dragon is one with the land.
Yeah. The next two things I have that are non-talent powers are Myrddraal powers and Ogier tree singing that seem to, I would call it non-talent powers as well.
Right, non-one power powers.
Right.
And then not really talents.
Yeah, not talents either.
Because we want to talk about talents in a separate, because there's a couple of different versions of talents. There's talents that are related to the power and talents that are not related to the power.
Yeah.
But that's a different episode.
I should probably start Myrddraal powers by saying, and in my notes I have this as the last sentence, but really very little is understood. And we see, I forget which of the Forsaken say, I forget where I'm getting this from, but even when you ask a Myrddraal how these powers works, they don't understand.
Yeah, they have no idea. I think, didn't Agenor torture one to death trying to get the secrets out of it?
I think
had
many.
No idea. Many, probably.
I think that's the story. I'll start reading this and see what happens. Myrddraal gains certain special powers from the Dark One. They have no eyes at all, or any further hint that there should have been eyes, but they can see like eagles in the day or night. I think that's a quote from Lan. They have the ability to cause paralyzing fear with a look of their eyeless face. They're able to move between and disappear into shadows, and mirrors only reflect an unclear vision of them. After entering a shadow, They have the ability to travel to a shadow far distant, in a way not even Forsaken can understand, which is what we were just talking about. Myrddraal also have the ability to cloak themselves and anything near them in complete silence. And I think this probably has something to do with why their cloaks don't move in the wind. They have like an ability to shield themselves from the outside world.
Well, I always thought that they don't fully exist in this reality, and so they're not affected by the wind. And again, we come back to the wind as symbolism.
Yeah.
It's a huge symbolism for change in the pattern. The Myrddraal are frozen. They're all exactly the same. They're all entirely unchanging. They look the same, and in a lot of ways, they exist outside of the pattern.
Yeah.
And so I can see that the ability to be completely silent is a side effect of being outside of the pattern rather than the other way around.
Where they can, exist in it, but not affect it in the same way that other living creatures do.
Exactly.
They also have the ability to detect channeling almost as well as a human channeler.
Don't they smell it, or like it makes them itch or something like that?
I do. Yeah, I think it's described as an itch.
But that might just be Shadar Haran.
I think you're right on that. That's where we hear that from, because otherwise we don't hear any other Myrddraal talk at any length, other than a few words. They have few known weaknesses, one of which is that they do not or will not cross running water.
Arabia had a good one. One says, I itch human when the Supergirls are kidnapped and they meet Ruark. It's like when they're being kidnapped and he's in the other room and he's like, they leave Tarvalon and someone hits him over the head and is like going to kidnap them. And then he like gives them a tea to make them sleep, but it ends up like waking them up instead. And they wake up in the back room and the Dark Friends are meeting with the Myrddraal in the front room.
Gotcha.
And he's like, wait a minute. I itch. Are you sure they're asleep? And then they bust out and like just fucking. That's when the Myrddraal, like all three of them, like one of them crushes the Myrddraal, one of them makes it burst into flame, and the other one like slices to pieces. And they all like, and Avienda's there. That's when Avienda shows up for the first time. And
gotcha.
It's an awesome scene where they just like
totally
obliterate the Myrddraal.
What book is that in? Do you know?
I want to say Fires of Heaven.
Fires of Heaven. It's appropriate. I guess I should also add that they have, I mean, they're not humans, they're like humans in some ways, but they have sort of, I was going to say, superhuman strength and speed, which seems to exist outside of whatever their muscles are capable of doing.
Don't forget that they are the descendants of Trollocs.
Right.
They are born of Trollocs, and they're throwbacks to the human stock that was used to create them.
Yeah, I forget who we see saying that, but they're essentially like the same percentage of channelers that exist in typical human stock are Myrddraal come out of typical Trolloc stock.
About 5%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, about 5% of those of quote-unquote Trollocs are born as Myrddraal. And
then I just have Ogier tree singing. Ogier tree singing, which is like the antithesis of Myrddraal powers.
Oh, yeah. I guess the one other thing with Myrddraal is, unless you really, really kill them, like Balefire or, obliterating the body, they will continue to thrash and move until the next sunset.
Oh, right. Just being ridiculously hard to kill.
Yeah, just totally hard to kill. And, they don't just thrash randomly. They will, stab with their sword repeatedly after you behead them. They are evil. It's like snakes' heads that'll keep biting.
Yeah.
They just won't admit they're dead.
I think that plays in really well to them existing outside or partially outside of the pattern somehow. Right,
that somehow they're able to still be active and not live. And it's not like, oh, if the next sun sets in 5 minutes, then they die. If the next sun sets in 23 hours, then they die. And it's like there's no relationship between the amount of time since they've been killed. It's like until the next sunset happens, which is this magical event somehow.
And the same way they're stronger and faster than they should be based on what they look like, their physical bodies.
They just don't follow the physical rules that everything else has to follow. And I think a big part of that is that they are somehow corrupted by the Dark One. I'm guessing Agenor used the true power to create the Trollocs, and that somehow that
has to be a part of it.
Yeah, it has to be a part of what causes this just incredible existence outside the pattern. Yeah. That lets them do a whole bunch of things.
So I guess I'll move into the tree singing. And I started this saying an ability mostly unique to the Ogier in the modern day. Here's another thing we've touched on a little in the regular chapter episodes. We see Rand tree sing later with effect.
And in his visions, we see Aiel, the Nim, the Green Man's race, and the Ogier all singing together.
Yeah.
To create the growing.
So we can maybe make an assumption with might be a little bit of a stretch that tree singing is something that humans can do but don't know how anymore or have lost the knowledge of.
I also wonder if maybe it's tied genetically to the Aiel.
Yeah.
Because we see the Aiel doing it, and then the only human we see in modern day times is Rand, and he is a descendant of the Aiel.
Yeah. In any case, tree singing allows the user to stimulate the growth of living plants, usually trees, through the use of special songs. It also allows them to use different songs to control the growth and to communicate in a way with the plant. We see Loyal do this at certain points where he says essentially he communicates with a tree and just kind of negotiates with it to make a shape, to make a new shape. Right. It's like a conversation.
I think of that with when he's like making songwood.
Yeah.
Instead of carving it, he's actually able to sing it.
Right.
But that's sort of a similar process, which is different than just the growing. I imagine
I guess what I'm saying is he describes it as more like a consensual relationship than like channeling it just makes something happen.
Right. Right.
Whereas tree singing seems to be a conversation almost, or a relationship.
That goes back to treating, I think the trees, Ogier have this relationship with trees where they see them as almost sentient beings.
Yeah.
The difference between an Ogier, a Nim, and a tree, those to me feel like they're on the same continuum.
The steps down, one after the other, tree, Nim, Ogier.
Yeah. I mean, the step from plant to animal.
Yeah.
Where the Nim sort of straddles the difference between the two.
I like that. Never thought of it that way. Tree singers are known to produce extremely distinctive and valuable wooden crafts, which we see at different places throughout the series, and they're described as priceless because there are so few tree singers left. Talented tree singers, anyway. They're able to make these wooden crafts without in any way harming the plant. Pulling, I have in quotes, the shaped wooden artifact out of the tree without hurting it. This ability seems to have dwindled in recent times, and Loyal is one of the most, or if not the most talented tree singers alive.
Isn't the item he pulls out, doesn't that stay alive? Unlike when we cut into a branch, it dies. But I think the staffs he pull out actually continue to live.
And grow.
They're living wood.
Oh, I like that. What about the bed frame that we see?
Oh, that's right. The songwood bed frame that he uses that's up in the attic of... isn't that in...
Camelin somewhere?
Camelin, yeah. In the Wandering Woman?
I can't remember.
The Queen's Blessing?
Is it?
No.
I don't think it's so. The Queen's Blessing.
No, that's later.
We definitely see that at some point. And I believe that there are at least a few inns in Camelin that have songwood furniture.
Yeah. Arabia is saying it's in Carian.
Oh, okay.
When they're traveling through. I remember it was in an inn. Do you remember which inn it was in? Which inn it was in? In an inn.
It was in an inn.
I wonder if the tree singing ability is at all related to the dragon's connection with the land.
It could be. That's why I have asked the question out loud before, because it's Rand, and because Luce Theron, Rand are the dragon. He could be, for instance, just singing the songs. He may know the songs and enjoy singing them while he's using his special dragon talents.
Right. I mean, he's singing like bawdy tavern songs.
I think we do see that at some point.
Yeah. Matt's like, "What are you singing?" And he's like, "Just some." He's like, "Are you singing like some tavern song?" He's like, "Yeah, that's what I'm singing. That's what works." So it seems to be that it's not necessarily the song that you're singing, but the connection to the land that lets him do what he does. And I wonder if, the Ogier have a special connection to the land, and that's what lets them...
I'm nodding. And maybe they have traditional songs that go along with it, but the words in the song aren't necessarily important so much as...
I really don't think they are.
The focus in the way that a channeler meditates in Ogier sings to do its magic.
And one of the things that is brought up repeatedly and is coming up in the chat channel right now is the song of the Tinkers, and whether that is actually the 3-part harmony between the Ogier, the Tree Brothers, and the Aiel.
Yeah. Right, the song.
Whether the song is that song.
The song, in quotes.
And I like the theory, but I really think the Tinker's song is an ideal. And that there's no actual song, there's no actual power that's going to satisfy all the conditions of, quote-unquote, the song.
Yeah. We've talked about this a little before, and we do know that Tinkers learned Ogier tree singing songs.
Yes.
But they don't work when the Tinkers sing them.
Exactly. But you might say, but I think it's more of a result of cultural symbolism. That song may have been the origin of the legend of the song, but it is not the song.
Right. I think more like an analogy, or like you're saying, a token where, like, finding the song representing them being at peace with the world and having a place in it. Yeah, like they once did.
Like it's an ideal.
Right.
Yeah.
That wraps up. How long did that run?
That was that's pretty much it for our powers. All right, good night. Do you remember which inn it was in? Which inn it was in? In an inn.
It was in an inn.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?